Knew I was going to make this video one day, but I didn't think it was gonna be this soon. Those of you that don't know, Brian gave us his last goodbyes yesterday in a vlog. I'll have the link down there in the description for anyone that hasn't seen it. It was, well, just like for many of us, including myself, very heartbreaking. Thinking about that, he will no longer be in the vlogs or anything like that. Although he's still with us, he's currently in hospice with his family. I believe, at least in video, this was the last time we were going to get an update for Brian. As you've probably seen from a few other of my fellow reptile YouTube dudes, I'd like to take today and just reminisce on some good memories with Brian and how he changed. How much he meant to me, how he took a chance on me. And when it comes to Brian, I probably started out like many of you, getting my very first reptile, Rex the Bearded Dragon. It was at that point I started wanting to check out some reptile YouTube, and like so many things, you click on reptile YouTube, who's gonna show up but Brian Barczyk? This is around 10 years ago at this point when I first found Brian from Snake Bites, and man, I was hooked on those videos. Like so many of you, I started binging that shit. I could not get enough. As my collection grew at that point, from one bearded dragon to a couple crested geckos, a chameleon, so on and so forth, I began on what I usually call the internet expert phase of my reptile keeping lifespan. That is when you just become, well, just god-awful. You know, anyone with a rack is an awful person. This is the only way you can, so on and so forth. So I was a dipshit back then. You know, the small-minded people can't see the big picture. That was me for a little bit, and so I fell off on the Brian Barczyk vlogs for a couple of years. When I first caught news of Brian building the zoo, when he first got the building, those first enclosures were getting in, that really sparked my interest back in. I started breeding a little bit on the side. My thoughts and opinions on things, as with most people when they get older, changed versatilely, and I began getting back into it, and heavily so. I think it was at that point, man, I don't think I missed a single vlog. That went on for years, man. First thing in the morning, waking up, it was a Brian Barczyk vlog to get going. Eating some cereal, getting your breakfast, Brian YouTube, and then heading off to work. Started getting into this stuff of my very own, starting my own YouTube channel, starting getting back into breeding, taking it more seriously, trying to build a business from it. And it became this videos, instead of being like an entertainment thing of the day to get the day started, they began, it was like an inspiration, right? I would wake up not feeling very like, oh, what am I gonna film? What am I gonna do? So I'd walk to Brian Barczyk. Now it would give me the inspiration that I needed to get my own videos out there and start consistently uploading and get my video count library up for YouTube. Fast forward to about 2 years ago, and that's when Brian and Jay started putting up some listings to be a guest on the Checking In podcast. I knew I had to get on that podcast, man. That was going to be a dream come true if I could make it. I can still remember, this was back when I was a mailman at the time, doing YouTube and breeding on the side. I stopped the mail truck in like for 30 minutes, just halted the mail for 30 minutes, trying to think of the perfect message I could send to make sure I could get a guest spot on Brian's podcast. I remember the message I sent to Jay. I didn't want to seem like, I don't know, I had this like weird ego thing, like I didn't want to be the dude that was watching all Brian's stuff, you know, I wanted to be the YouTuber. So I think I said, I was like, oh, one of my fans let me know, but it was me religiously watching Brian's stuff. I ended up sending the message, and a couple of hours later, I think actually by the time I just finished my mail route, I got a reply back from Jay, and he said I was able to come. I remember that day, man. I was telling everybody, bro, how excited I was to be able to have a chance to go visit the Riptarium, sit down and shoot the shit with Brian for like an hour, 2 hours, man. That was awesome, man. That was... End up flying down there, and there's a problem with the rented car. I didn't know you need to use a credit card, not a debit card, or else you had to do a deposit, something along those lines. I couldn't get a car to rent. I was like kind of SOL. We ended up Ubering. Our hotel's like an hour and a half from Brian, so it's like an $80, $90 Uber to get down there. Money's nothing, you know. We're going to the Riptarium. We're already Michigan, dude. $80 is gonna stop me from seeing the Reptarium? Nah. So we ended up paying the $80 thing, getting down there, and we go to open the door, and the door's locked. I'm like, well, this is weird. I'm knocking on the door. I can't remember what employee opened it, and they're like, we're closed. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm here for the podcast. Brian sent me. And I was like, hang on. So they closed the door, and it's like a couple of minutes of them trying to figure out what's going on. The whole time, my anxiety's starting to go up. I'm like, bro, is this the wrong day? Am I not supposed to be here? You know, this pretty hefty, you know. I think it was like a 600, you know, flying 2 people, Uber, hotel. That was like $600 to get down there. So I started to freak out a little bit. It was all good. Brian was busy doing some stuff, so we ended up walking around the Reptarium for a little bit, and then the man came up. Always interesting, you know. I watched Brian for every day, pretty much, years and years, to then see him in person. It's a surreal feeling. It was a great time, man. We had a fantastic time. I got to talk to Brian a little bit, talk a little, you know, shop about reptile breeding, building a business. We ended up doing the podcast. I had a great time. I was very nervous about it. I think I only did like one stupid slip up where I just like was awkward. But other than that, I think I did pretty damn good. After that, we head back up to the Reptarium, hang out for a little longer. I got a hold of one of my dream animals, a melanistic American alligator. Absolutely incredible. I know everyone likes salt, everyone likes the albino. It's the melanistic for me personally. So I got a whole pepper, man. That was really cool. That was awesome. You got to do a bunch of stuff, see a bunch of animals, and, you know, just the usual awesome Brian experience when you go visit the Reptarium. The thing I'll never forget, and this was just... So we're about to head out. And we got to find an Uber. It's going to be another, you know, $80, $90, whatever, getting back to the hotel. As busy as Brian was, and shop was open, it was hectic in there, he decided to take, and this was a 2-hour round trip, take the time out of the day. He's like, no, don't worry, I'll drive you back. And we drove back, and I got to hear stories from Brian for an hour while he was just kind enough to drive us. I mean... It's still crazy to think about that, man. The man is so busy, a million different things. And he's like, no, don't worry. I'll spend 2 hours just driving you back. Like, I don't know anyone else that would do that. I'm going to be honest with you. Brian was something else. He's just a good guy, man. And unfortunately, that day was the last day I saw Brian in person. And it still just brings me so much joy to at least have that experience, you know, being able to go on the podcast, see the Reptarium in person, have him give him a tour, driving me back, hearing Brian's stories. That is moments of my life that I will hold for the rest of my life. I think it's extremely prudent to note that I wasn't as big as I am today. Granted, I don't think I'm very big, but I was at no one. I mean, like, 1,800, 3,000 followers, a couple hundred on Instagram, and I don't remember if TikTok I was doing back then. Nobody. Smallest of the small fries, right? Every other big creator wouldn't take the time, right? I was getting no message. I mean, they weren't being seen. They just like, it was never a thing, right? No one would ever talk to the small guy, the small reptile YouTuber. That was not Brian, man. Brian said, hey, come on down. Get down here. Let's do the podcast together. And he took the time. Brian was the first big creator to ever take a chance on me. And that's something that not very, very few content creators will do, is taking a chance with someone that has not established themselves, is very new to this thing. I've been only doing it for, I think, a year or two at that time, maybe 18 months. That generosity, I'll never forget, man. I think to this day, my biggest regret will always be not seeing him at Animal Con, man, not finding a way to get down there. You know, as followers know, you know, we lost our house, big... Yeah, I had to move the whole collection here. I had no money after that, after all the moving expenses and everything that goes into that. I had nothing, not a cent to my name at the time, but... Fuck, man, I wish I figured out a way to get down there. I should have. I'll hold that regret for the rest of my life, not seeing him one last time at Animal Con. I thought he'd be for one more, maybe. I kind of just held that optimistic thought in my head, and I was, fuck, man. I remember about a week ago, man, when that Instagram story came and we got that update on him. I was a fucking wreck, man. I broke down. Cause I really wanted him to see the aquarium, man. I really thought that. True in my heart, man. I knew I missed Animal Con. I don't care what it takes. I'm gonna see the Legacy Aquarium, right? I was gonna shake Brian's hand and congratulate him. Opening that aquarium. Something I really love is Brian stayed true to himself through to the very end, man. Living his dream and letting nothing stop him. I know these fucking assholes, man, out there. Everyone has their slight little smirks and remarks about what he's doing. I would have done the exact same thing, man. The man lived his dream to the very end. He didn't take a back seat when he got the diagnosis. He went full force into trying and making his dream come true. That is just... oh, that's so fucking inspirational. I don't know, man. There'll never be another Brian Barczyk here in the reptile community. You know, a lot of people, I've always hated this, to be honest. The people, there's always the Steve, who's the next Steve Irwin, right? And I didn't like it when people said it about Chandler. I don't like it when people say it about Brian, because they're different people, man. Brian's not the Steve Irwin of YouTube. Brian is Brian, man. It's different. Brian's one of a kind, man. I don't think you can compare Brian to anyone. It's like I don't think you can compare Steve to anyone. They're different people, and they've both made these giant impacts, and I think they should be separate. I think Brian has earned to be in a place of his own, because, man, that's a one-of-a-kind dude. There will never be another Brian Barczyk. Anyone... I just fucking hate to see 5 years from now, you know, this guy's the next fucking Brian. Bullshit, man. There'll never be another guy like Brian. Although we might not ever see Brian in a vlog or anything like that again, his legacy will still live on for years and years to come. His legacy will live when the aquarium is built and opened. His legacy will continue to build as so many people like myself share our stories on how Brian touched us and how he just made this massive impact on what seems to be each and every person that's met Brian has an amazing story of the generosity and kindness that he has. We love you, Brian. I'm gonna miss you. Things feel a little different these days. I think as we all just kind of come to terms with it, it's going to be a little dark, but I think we can put a little light in this darkness by sharing stories like this on just how amazing of a guy you are, man. We love you, Brian. Thank you for being an inspiration to so many people, including myself.